I told you, appeals court seems poised to side with Trump on National Guard deployment in LA. Why? They're gonna put some legalese out of their butt and tell you why it's lawful for him to do so, right? Because why? Two of them were put there by him. Okay, so he has it compromised. And you aren't recognizing this, and this government, the state government isn't recognizing this, and Democrats aren't recognizing this. We cannot utilize law in order to move forward. We need to utilize what? American constitutionalism and those within our established foundations. One of them is John Locke, the True Treatise of Government. Let's look. His chapter on tyranny. An usurpation is the exercise of power which another hath a right to. So tyranny is the exercise of power beyond the right. Now the appeals court is saying, hey, he has the right, even though the main court said that he didn't, which nobody can have a right to. And this is making use of the power anyone has in his hands, not for the good of those who are under it, but for his own private, separate advantage. Now you're gonna say, well, if the court literally said that, he has the power to, then who are we to say that he doesn't? Federalist 47, the accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary, in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elective, may justly be pronounced the definition of tyranny. Were the federal constitution really chargeable with the accumulation of tyranny, or with a mixture of powers having a dangerous tendency to tyranny, no further arguments would be necessary to inspire a universal rejection of this system. So we are not compatible with tyranny. And the fact that a compromised court, followed by a compromised, legislative positions that he has a right that it literally doesn't give him to, because we have what? Constitutional supremacy, which means that no legislation or decision contrary to the literal social contract is capable of being valid. But there's so much ambiguity that it's a lot, right? So in that reality, we have to go back not to law, but to our political theory. When he, however entitled, makes not the law, but his will, the rule, and his commands and actions are not directed to the preservation of the properties of his people, but the satisfaction of his own ambition, revenge, greed, or any other irregular passion. Wherever law ends, tyranny begins. This is literally engraved into the Department of Justice in DC, right? If the law be transgressed to another's harm, and whoever in authority exceeds the power given by him by the law makes use of the force he has under his command to compass that upon the subject which the law allows not, which is him sending the National Guard, right, to California against our governor. Ceases, so stops in that compass to be a magistrate. So he stops to be a governor or authority over that society. And acting without authority may be opposed as any other man who by force invades the rights of another. So Governor Gavin Newsom, why are you not utilizing your role as state commander-in-chief to defend us? Because you know that the law was going to end up to this reasoning, right? In that reality, we have to utilize those political, grounds that give us that role of constitutional supremacy above that of even legislation and judicial decision, because nothing, including the courts, can subvert the constitutional order. Article 6, Section 3, your duty isn't to the government, it is to constitutional order, and particularly to California's constitution, right? Our rights are not dependent on the federal constitution. Our rights are not dependent on the federal government. And yet there's 40% of the population that is being just detained just because they don't have proof that we don't have to show as U.S. citizens in order to show that we were born here, right? So they'll take you to detention centers and they'll, send you to one line for the gas chambers and one line for the labor camps. Oh, my bad. One line to leave because you're a U.S. citizen and one line for detention and deportation. For exceeding the bounds of authority is no more a right and a grade than a petty officer, no more justifiable and a king than a constable, but so much worse in him as that he has much more trust put in him, is supposed from the advantages of education and counselors to have better knowledge and less reason to do it, having already a greater share than the rest of his brethren. So he's capable of having those resources to know that he shouldn't, but he's doing it anyways. And this part really tells us why our elected officials don't really want to touch on this solution yet. May the commands then of Prince be opposed. May he be resisted as often as anyone shall find themselves aggrieved. But imagine he has not right done to him. So can he be opposed for the rights that he actually doesn't have and he's overstepping, right? This will unhinge and overturn all politics, and instead of government and order, leave nothing but anarchy and confusion. I've told you, the reason why the courts wouldn't want to maximize on contempt charges is because if they ignore it, it's basically telling us, the government is lawless, which means anarchy, right? And the solution to not having anarchy is a state government who can actually intervene and defend and exist as a commander-in-chief. Because there's only anarchy when we don't have the leadership of someone who is elected. And we've elected a commander-in-chief in our state, and he's failing to uphold that. So to this, John Locke answers that force is to be opposed to nothing but to unjust and unlawful force. Bounty hunters are over here in California looking for brown people, okay? I'm just saying, whoever makes any opposition in any other case draws on himself a just condemnation. Opposition may be made to the illegal acts of any inferior officer or other commissioned by him unless he will, by actually putting himself into a state of war with his people, dissolve the government and leave them to that defense which belongs to everyone in that state of nature. For nothing is to be accounted hostile force, but where it leaves not the remedy of such an appeal. So the fact that he has the appeals courts and they position his side will tell us that law isn't working independently, it's working politically, right? It is such force alone of not being capable of going through the courts and getting that justice that puts him in that, uses it into a state of war and makes it lawful to resist him. Governor Gavin Newsom, either you will lead this or there's going to be a spark. That's not going to include you. The chapter on the dissolution of government. There is one way more whereby such a government may be dissolved, and that is when he who has the supreme executive authority neglects and abandons that charge so that the laws already made can no longer be put in execution. That would have been January 6th because he obviously has the backbone to send, military to Los Angeles, but he didn't to January 6th. So that the laws already made can no longer be put into execution. This is demonstratively to reduce all to anarchy and so effectively to dissolve the government. And now we question, why is he going against the Constitution? It's because he already eroded the Constitution and now he's just replacing it. Federalist 52, from the danger to liberty from the overgrown and all-grasping prerogative of a hereditary magistrate, so government, supported and fortified by a hereditary branch of the legislative authority. So this positions, the legislative who is in cahoots with the executive, the danger from legislative usurpations, which by assembling all power in the same hands must lead to the same tyranny as is threatened by executive usurpations. And then it promotes in Federalist 47, right, because the accumulation of all powers, legislative, so Congress, executive, the president, and judiciary, the courts, in the same hands, whether of one, the few, or many, is literally the definition of tyranny. So in this reality, if we are in tyranny and wherever law ends, tyranny begins, and his compromised courts are going for him and are trying to create the unlawful as lawful, that mandates a role of our state government and defending us. Federalist 9 by Alexander Hamilton. Should abuses creep into one part, they are reformed by those that remain sound. Now, if our governor had remained sound, he would be capable of restoring that, right? But what's positioning now is that the system is compromised, a constitutional coup. The country may be destroyed on one side and not on the other. The country may be dissolved and the states preserve their sovereignty. So our sovereignty would be to have our state's commander-in-chief at the forefront of defense. And he's not doing that. But maybe as soon as the appeals court goes to him, it's going to create that, right? But if he doesn't, that means that he's going to hold us into this tyrant regime, and he's going to want us to readapt to this being lawful. And what that means for us is going to dictate our future. Are we going to resist without a commander-in-chief? Or are we going to resist with him? And that's going to be the decision. We're much more vulnerable without him, but ultimately, if we don't actually resist, then that creates a reality in which we are stuck and we have given up liberty and justice for all.